What if I told you that the woman who would become the world's first billionaire author was once so broke she couldn't afford to photocopy her manuscript, that she wrote on napkins in cafes because she couldn't afford to heat her apartment, that the most successful book series in history was rejected 12 times? This is the story of Joanne Rowling, before she became J.K. Rowling, before Harry Potter, before the magic changed everything. Born on July 31st, 1965, in Yate, near Bristol, England, little Joanne Rowling was what you'd call a bookworm. While other kids played outside, she had her nose buried in stories. At just 6 years old, she wrote her first book about a rabbit, creatively titled Rabbit. By 11, she'd already written her first novel about 7 cursed diamonds. But here's the thing about childhood dreams: they don't pay the bills. After graduating from the University of Exeter in 1987 with a degree in French, Joanne did what most graduates do. She panicked about what to do with her life. Her biographers describe her as an average student who prioritized her social life, spending more time reading Dickens and Tolkien than attending lectures. She moved to London, bouncing between temporary secretary jobs. The dream of being a writer? It was still there, tucked away in notebooks, scribbled during lunch breaks. She'd write adult novels in her spare time, but nothing ever got published. The dream was fading, buried under bills and rejection letters. She even landed a job with Amnesty International, documenting human rights abuses in French-speaking Africa. Important work, meaningful work, but not the work her heart truly wanted. Then came 1990, the year everything shifted. Joanne was frequently traveling by train from Manchester to London to visit her boyfriend. On one particular journey, the train was delayed for excruciating hours, stuck between stations. No phone to scroll through, no laptop to work on, just Joanne, a window, and her thoughts. And that's when it happened. She didn't have a pen. She didn't have paper. But suddenly, crystal clear, as if he'd walked right up to her seat, there he was. A skinny boy with black hair, round glasses, and a lightning bolt scar on his forehead. A boy who didn't know he was a wizard. Harry Potter. The entire concept flooded her mind. Hogwarts, the four houses, the magical world hidden from ordinary people. By the time that train finally lurched into King's Cross Station, she had the seed of something extraordinary. She rushed home and began writing feverishly, pouring out the world that had appeared to her. But life, as it often does, had other plans. Just months after that fateful train ride, in December 1990, Joanne's mother died from multiple sclerosis. She was only 45. Joanne was devastated. Grief consumed her. And suddenly, death, which had always been an abstract concept in her stories, became deeply, painfully real. It would later become the central theme of Harry Potter. The Mirror of Ariste, where Harry sees his dead parents. That came from Rowling's raw grief. From that moment on, she later said, death became the central theme of the 7 books. Desperate for a fresh start, she moved to Portugal in 1991 to teach English. There, she met Jorge Arentz, a Portuguese television journalist. They married in October 1992. In July 1993, she gave birth to her daughter, Jessica. It should have been a new beginning, but the marriage was troubled. By November 1993, just 4 months after Jessica's birth, they separated. Joanne returned to the UK, to Edinburgh, Scotland, to be near her sister, with a 3-month-old baby, a failed marriage, and 3 chapters of an unfinished manuscript about a boy wizard. She was, by her own admission, as poor as it's possible to be in modern Britain without being homeless. She lived on government benefits in a tiny, unheated flat. Depression engulfed her. She described herself as the biggest failure I knew. But she had Jessica, she had an old typewriter, and she had Harry Potter. With no money to heat her apartment, Joanne would bundle up Jessica in her stroller and walk to cafes. She'd order a single cup of coffee and nurse it for hours while Jessica slept, writing by hand on whatever paper she could find. Napkins, scraps, the backs of old bills. Between 1993 and 1995, she wrote during every spare moment. She enrolled in a teaching certification program to eventually get a proper job, but the story consumed her. 5 years after that train journey, in June 1995, she finally typed the last word of Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone on her old manual typewriter. She had a complete manuscript. Now came the hardest part, finding someone who had actually read it. Joanne went to her local library in Edinburgh and found a directory called the Writers and Artists Yearbook. She needed a literary agent, someone to represent her work to publishers. She'd already tried one agent who rejected her and kept her ring binder, which she could barely afford to replace. So, she picked another name almost at random, Christopher Little. Why? Because she liked his name. It sounded like something from a children's book. She mailed him the first 3 chapters. When the package arrived at Christopher Little's cramped, paper-stuffed office near Victoria Station in London, it went straight into the rejection pile. Little himself thought children's books didn't make money. But his office manager, Brian E. Evans, noticed the distinctive binding, pulled it from the trash, and read it. She was captivated. She convinced Little to read it. 3 days later, he signed Joanne Rowling as a client. He sent the full manuscript to 12 publishers. 12 rejections came back. The book was too long. Children wouldn't relate to a boarding school story. Fantasy doesn't sell. Boys won't read books about wizards. The reasons varied, but the answer was always the same. No full year went by. Joanne kept teaching, kept struggling, kept wondering if she'd been foolish to dream. Then Christopher Little called Barry Cunningham, an editor at Bloomsbury Publishing, a small, relatively new publisher that had just started a children's division. Cunningham agreed to read the manuscript as a favor, that he read the first 2 chapters and was intrigued. But instead of deciding himself, he did something brilliant. He brought it home and gave it to his 8-year-old daughter, Alice Newton. Actually, she was the daughter of Nigel Newton, Bloomsbury's chairman. Alice took the first chapter upstairs. An hour later, she came floating back down and told her father, "Dad, this is better than anything you've ever shown me." She demanded to read the rest immediately. That was it. That was the moment that in 1996, Bloomsbury offered Joanne Rowling £2,500, about $3,400, for the rights to publish Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone in the UK and Commonwealth. It wasn't much. The print run was only 1,000 copies, with 500 going to libraries. Barry Cunningham even told her, "You should get a day job. You'll never make money writing children's books." But there was one crucial detail Christopher Little negotiated: exceptionally high royalties if the book sold well. That turned out to be the masterstroke of the century. And one more thing. Bloomsbury's marketing team worried that boys wouldn't read a book written by a woman. So they asked Joanne Rowling to publish under her initials. She didn't have a middle name, so she chose K for Kathleen, her grandmother's name. And that's how the world met J.K. Rowling. On June 26, 1997, exactly 25 years ago this month, Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone hit bookstore shelves. Within months, it was a sensation. Within years, it was a global phenomenon. Today, the Harry Potter series has sold over 600 million copies, been translated into more than 80 languages, and spawned one of the highest-grossing film franchises in history. J.K. Rowling became the first author in history to achieve billionaire status. But before all that, she was just Joanne, a broke single mom on welfare, writing in cafes because she couldn't afford heat, holding on to a dream that 12 publishers had already rejected. Her story isn't just about magic. It's about believing in your story when no one else does. It's about writing in the margins of poverty. It's about an 8-year-old girl who said, "This is better than anything you've shown me." Sometimes, all it takes is one person to believe. And sometimes, the greatest magic of all is refusing to give up.